One of the biggest hurdles that a writer or director faces is how to begin their story. Where should it start, and does that need to hold any significance to the overarching plot? As the introduction has the power to make or break it. Opposite to the typical narrative structure, the conclusion comes first in the mind of an artist before they know how to commence it. Although the masses usually fixate about a piece of media possessing a satisfying finale, a symbolic and meaningful inception goes a long way. Now, focusing on the cinematic medium, the opening scenes hold a lot of merit. It's easier said than done, but initiating a film isn't a simple task. And what's even more vital is how they choose to introduce the characters we are meant to get attached to. One of my major gripes with the film comes with how they choose to handle its dialogue, the tool that is used to progress the story. There are numerous titles that have great messages and points to convey. However, the way they decide to go about it makes them feel unnatural. The structure of a film, while being critical, isn't given a similar amount of attention as much as the moral that it imparts the viewers with. Let's take Korida's Shoplifters as an example, and how it excels at all the talking points I have mentioned so far. The film opens with Osamu and Sota using their system of hand gestures to communicate while shoplifting for various necessities from a general store, not prior to them entering the shop or explaining their plan so the viewer can become aware of it. This sort of respectful treatment of the person watching and not trying to force feed its set piece sounds like an obvious move to make. However, isn't as common as it should be. They don't need to explain or expand about it, as the characters themselves are aware and adept with it. The second step that this film executes wonderfully is its method of establishing the lives of people we follow throughout the film. And it does that with the help of two things: inserting the character of Yuri and gradually showcasing the jobs and day-to-day activities of each family member. The former is a brilliant implementation of the usual inexperienced character whose main purpose is to act as a means to feed information to the audience. And the latter helps to add more depth to the role they have to fill and gives us an inner look at their unfulfilled dreams and hopeful desires. One of the strongest points of Shoplifters is how it naturally progresses and reveals the backstory of its characters. Particularly a certain unsaid and troubled past that isn't simply dumped into a conversation and only briefly hinted at as it realistically would be, which remains hidden until the finale of the film, as that's what the family members were trying to do. Korida has mastered the niche genre of slice of life, where he documents a segment of people's lives. However, there is another director who infuses a daring twist to it.
好きじゃないよ見ないで
Lee Chang-dong is a South Korean filmmaker who was introduced to the film industry in early 90s, and it was in 1997, after being encouraged by his peers who were impressed by his abilities and knowledge, to direct his first feature-length film, Green Fish. And since then, he has gone to complete 5 more films in the span of 20 years, all being critically acclaimed and highly appreciated, albeit in a smaller scale and limited amount or lesser than they clearly deserve to receive. However, all of that changed with the release of Burning, a psychological thriller full of mysteries and unresolved queries. A title that stands apart like a sore thumb from his entire filmography, not thematically, but structurally. To explain that, we have to get a better understanding of how his films work. Peppermint Candy is told in reverse chronological order, which accounts various major events from a man's life who is pushed to commit suicide. In 2 decades and 7 different sections, which are symbolically titled, and their meanings are unfolded in a simple but beautiful manner, we witness the journey of a person whose innocence is crushed amidst the civil unrest and economical decline of the nation. Being constantly imposed with toxic masculinity while working as a lawman and traumatic experiences while serving for his country makes him more cynical, violent, and even manipulative in nature. Behavioral traits he couldn't get rid of even if he wanted to. Although he was forced to mold himself into that structure, dissociative conduct was always present and simply heightened by numerous damaging circumstances in his life. and the outcome is the worst for the woman in his relationships. Symbolic titles, opening, and visual motifs are continued in Oasis, which chronicles an unlikely and difficult relationship between two misfits whose family hardly understand them or truly care about their well-being. They, along with people who surround them, despise their company, wreak more pain into their lives, and generally just take advantage of their unfortunate condition, which becomes a factor that unites and allows a bond to blossom between them, which has an innate bittersweet feel to it. Although there is no insincerity in their part, the so-called social and functioning adults of the society continue to fabricate more issues and disrupt their lives with their hypocritical mentality. The way this film begins paints our lead character as an innocent man with a problematic past, and aptly reveals the actual reasoning behind his prison sentence. Forever misunderstood and misused by his family, who were supposed to protect him. Akin to the painting of the Oasis, the romance between them remains like a hopeful mirage that has a slim possibility to ever exist. Hard-hitting themes are resumed in Secret Sunshine, a character study about a single mother who is wrestling with the question of grief and faith. The film takes place post the death of her husband, and after a brief stint of trying to live her life more positively, her dearly loved son gets kidnapped and is later found dead. A crime committed by an acquaintance out of sheer jealousy. She might not be a perfect guardian, but she's an honest woman who is feeling lost after becoming a widow, where people either question her demeanor, actions, and past, or bombard her with advices or offer unwanted assistance. Faith, forgiveness, and peace that religion offers plays a huge role in the film. Some use it for hopeful desires, some in the name of others' benefit, and some who are on the verge of breaking apart. The unreliable side of spirituality is questioned through various means. And underneath all of that, there is her traumatic past with her father, misogynistic behavior from deceitful men who pretend to be righteous, and a small town where gossip and half-truths are used to characterize an entire person. With poetry, the director created something special. It's simplistic in terms of how it is presented. A woman in her 60s, struggling with Alzheimer's disease, develops an interest in poems and hopes to write one of her own. The conflict amidst this comes from the suicide of a young girl who was sexually assaulted by her grandson along with 5 other boys for over 6 months, and the parents deciding to compensate the victim's family with money to protect the future of their kids, an amount she can never raise to save her grandson. The film, much like a lead character, celebrates insignificant moments from her existence that will later on become memorable, of whom she will eventually lose grip of. However, it doesn't dissolve into the melodrama that comes with it. It's far more invested in how she is forced to please others and never given the opportunity to act out her dreams, which culminates to a monumental and heart-wrenching ending that not only connects the polar ends of the film, but characters who are intergenerationally divided. Lee Chang-dong makes easily comprehensible and symbolically titled films with toned-down cinematography. The complexity comes through the exploration of various sensitive topics, unconventional or anti-hero protagonists' situation or their surrounding. While the naturalism fashion of his direction is easy to follow, depth is added by its solid and sound interconnected structure that has a realistic sense of progression and revelation of information about the past or events that occurred off camera. His conservative and socialist upbringing shaped him as the person he is, and his filmmaking style. Hence, majority of his work critiques the Korean society and features social commentary about the repressive and rampant issues or troubled past of the nation. Facets such as loss of innocence, alienation, and despair can be easily found in his psychologically traumatized characters with tragic backstory, which are used to examine their flawed personality and, in the process, provoke uncomfortable emotions and questions about ourselves. Theme-wise, Burning isn't any different than his past films. That value comes from how it is constructed and the constraints that comes with genre films. So, I guess the time has came to delve into its mystifying story and maybe, along the way, find some answers. The opening scene alone has a lot to say. It leaves us in the middle of a busy street where we follow a man whose identity remains hidden for the moment until we're introduced to another core character and she discloses his name to the viewers along with various details about her past and specifications whose validity can't be confirmed, which quickly establishes what sort of person she is. Mysterious and straightforward with her conversations, but most importantly, how she responds when asked a question.
그동안 열심히 돈 모았거든. 여행 가려고.
왜 하필 아프리카야?
판토마임이다. 나 요즘 판토마임 배우고 있잖아.
As these questions, which are usually left unanswered, are really important in this film.
무슨 문제냐고 안 물어보네.
문제야 항상 있잖아.
Was the cat even real? Did she ever get a plastic surgery which was heavily influenced by him calling her ugly when they were young, if that even happened, or in his case, the recurring untimely calls with no response, and a cabinet full of knives in his father's house? Some are treated with justifiable answers, and some are left open for interpretation, or its truth is merely hinted at. And then comes Ben, which, as labeled by Lee Jung-soo, is a great Gatsby. His past, occupation, and affluence are never unveiled. However, his thrill-chasing mindset, lack of emotional stimuli, and a sense of superiority complex are gradually made apparent. Urban living, youth unemployment, and wealth or class divide have been touched upon in his previous works, but in here, it is the driving force. Those themes are illustrated through several noticeable means: their vehicles, living condition, and place of work. However, there are a couple of understated divergences between them. Lee Jung-soo and Hae-mi grew up in the same village, but their adult life is extremely distinct. While the former is still stuck in the past and struggles to leave behind those ideals, the latter is a forward-looking individual and has easily adapted to her modern lifestyle. And smaller details like the difference in what brand of cigarette they use. The contrast in the place of residency between Ben and Lee Jung-soo is visibly evident. But Ben's initial response when he arrives at Lee Jung-soo's home sonically separates them.
안녕하세요.
이게 무슨 소리예요?
아 이거 북한에서 대남 방송 쏘는 스피커 소리예요.
The former lives in a well-to-do neighborhood and leads a lavish life, but the noiseless nature of it is what he cherishes the most.
네, 예쁘네요.
조용해요.
Now, let's go back to more questions, particularly this one, which is never audibly answered.
재물은 말하자면 그냥 메타포야.
메타포는 또 뭐야?
메타포에 대해선 종수 씨에게 물어봐.
What is a metaphor? Is it Ben referring to the food he makes as an offering? Or is it when he performs a magic trick that rids Hae-mi of her deep-seated pain? Let's focus on her for a moment. According to her mother, she is capable of coming up with believable falsified stories about her life. But when it comes to being vulnerable and revealing her inner conflict with existence, she doesn't hold back.
죽는 건 너무 무섭고 그냥 아예 없었던 것처럼 사라질 수 있었으면 좋겠다.
One of her presumed fake anecdotes recites her falling into a well and being stuck there until Lee Jong-soo comes to her rescue. Was this a metaphor for her burning desire to be liberated from that depressed state of hers with the help of Lee Jong-soo?
얘 얼굴이 딱 보이는 거야. 그때 종수가 날 발견해서 구출됐지. 그런데 기억도 못하네.
먹을 거 좀 사왔어요.
The protagonist who wrestles to focus on his novel as his entire life is dictated by people around him. Most interestingly, by his problematic and abusive father, who made him burn every single piece of clothing owned by her mother after she left them.
엄마가 우리 남매를 두고 집을 나간 것도 그것 때문이었어요. 엄마가 집을 나간 날 내가 엄마의 옷을 태웠어요. 저 마당에 불을 지펴놓고 아버지가 시켰어요. 내 손으로 직접 태우라고.
A metaphorical burning that still haunts him. Let's focus on that burning and the enigmatic instigation of a man with a foreign name who just arrived from a foreign land. One of the biggest metaphors that Ben himself reiterates multiple times is his hobby of periodically burning abandoned and methodically chosen greenhouses, which, as stated by himself, is very close to Lee Jong-soo's home and disappears without any trace of ever existing. Pretty similar to how Haemye wanted to vanish away, and fits the bill for his ideal victim. Low moral hopeless loners whose disappearance wouldn't be tracked.
한국 경찰이 그런 데 신경 안 쓰거든요. 한국에는요. 비닐하우스들이 진짜 많아요. 쓸모없고 지저분해서 눈에 거슬리는 비닐하우스들. 걔네들은 다 내가 태워주기를 기다리는 것 같아요. 그리고 난 그 불타는 비닐하우스를 보면서 희열을 느끼는 거죠.
There are several direct and indirect indications towards the theory that Ben designated her to be his next target and either killed her or, with the insertion of this response from Lee Jong-soo's mother, smuggled her vital body parts. An experienced criminal or a miscalculated and overconfident narcissist who intentionally leaves traces of misconduct that happened to a broke and stranded woman. Let's go back to that burning, but this time the symbolic title and its origin. William Faulkner being Lee Jong-soo's favorite author, and Ben reading collected stories of William Faulkner isn't a mere coincidence, as one of the short stories from the said novel acts as a stylistic source for the film, merged with another short story from Haruki Murakami's The Elephant Vanishes. The plot remains the same. There is the class conflict and obsession or fascination with the lost girl and burned down greenhouses. However, there are a handful of changes here and there, the most prominent one being the ending and the death of Ben by the hands of Lee Jong-soo. Economically, they are vastly different, but both of them possess certain characteristics. Although he tries his best to eradicate the evidence, the steps he took to get to that point will lead back to him. And unlike Haemye, Ben is a wealthy individual whose case will be investigated. The reason behind this action of his is quite obvious. It never mattered that his suspicion of foul play from Ben's side was verified or not. He disdained his persona for the longest time, and in a way took his advice to lead his life in a more free-flowing and fun momentum.
진지하면 재미없어요. 즐겨야지. 여기서 베이스를 느껴야 돼요. 뼛속에서부터 그게 좀 울려줘야 그게 살아있는 거지.
Protagonist in his own reality, he takes matter onto himself and, much like his father, lets all that tension loose out of nowhere. Burning is another typical Lee Chang-dong film. The mystery genre is what creates the unsatisfying feel that some viewers might experience after watching it, feeling betrayed that they were never provided with a satisfying closure. The genre tropes is what frames the ending as vague. However, there was never a sense of ambiguity. It was just a chunk of their life we were allowed to witness as a bystander.